All right, Michael, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man, of course.
100. So let's just start all the way back at the beginning because what really fascinates me is the musical journey you've been on. So I want to know how you started out in the scene in general. For example, what was your local scene like growing up? What was it like going to shows when you were younger?
Okay, so yeah, the first shows I went to were when I was in like sixth grade. I grew up in North County, San Diego, like Vista, Oceanside area. And yeah, I found out through like shows through like skateboarding and older kids at the skate park would just listen to like heavier music or whatever, so when I was younger, so I found out about a lot of things when I was around, I don't know, maybe like 10 or something like that. I think the first like show I went to was when I was about 10 or something like that. And then which was like pop punk, and then I heard metal and stuff, all that stuff. But yeah, I started playing guitar around then, and then I moved to New Mexico, Taos, New Mexico when I was like 11 and or 12, yeah, 11, 12, something like that. And that place is really, really small. There's like 5,000 people there. So there is no scene really like that. It's
Yeah.
like in the Rocky Mountains, like close to Colorado. And yes, but so I had like friends too. It was a lot of it was through skateboarding. Um and yeah, we just kind of like started like punk bands and stuff there and would play like coffee houses and like the Ski Valley and stuff like that. So like really small town type shit. And yeah, basically, so I didn't really have a local scene, so I kind of had to build one and throw my own shows and stuff when I was like pretty young. So I kind of learned how to do that. And then yeah, as soon as I graduated high school, I moved to LA and then started my band Goliath. That was kind of like how I got to that point.
That makes sense. So naturally, you really immersed yourself in playing music and you really built it out that way as opposed to just going to shows.
Yeah, my parents are musicians. My dad's a guitar player. My mom plays like percussion and like sings a bit. And they had like bands when I was a kid, which were like classic rock, like blues oriented kind of stuff. But I still found out about a lot of music like pretty young. Like I noticed pretty young that I liked, I guess maybe more obscure music than stuff that was just on the radio than like a lot of kids who are around me. Because I like found out about like Black Sabbath and stuff like that pretty young, and then like because of that, I found out about Korn and stuff that was happening at the time, and Slipknot and Deftones and all that stuff went out. Yeah, so basically, I got into it pretty young, but a lot of it was from like skate videos and Tony Hawk's like the pro skater stuff too. But a lot of it, same with even like being into like hip hop production stuff. A lot of those early skate videos, like 411 videos and things like that, had just instrumental versions of hip hop songs. So that was kind of what I learned what like a hip hop producer did, because I heard the songs without, rapping on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it was through skateboarding and like snowboard videos.
And around what year was that? I'm curious because I just had a conversation the other day with Jess Margera, and we were talking about the CKY era of skateboarding and of music and how that, connected with video games. What era was that for you? Around
This
what
would
years?
this would have been the late '90s.
Okay,
So I would
word.
have been probably like 8 or so.
Okay.
I think that was probably 8. I would say 8 was probably, so that would be like 98.
Okay, because that was a really cool time period I remember. So that kind of brings me to a previous point where you were discussing Goliath. Tell me about what it was like during those years and your transition to Winds of Plague.
Yeah, okay. So when I moved to LA from Taos, New Mexico, I went to recording school. Just but really I wanted to like move to LA to start a deathcore band, honestly. And I had found out about metalcore and all that stuff via there was like I found out about they're like the local scene or in San Diego, like North County, San Diego, which is where Blink 182 is from and where Azalea Dying is from and stuff like that. So
Sure.
there was like I found out that these bands were like that the older kids, who skated, which were like some metalhead kids and like some punk kids and stuff like that, that the stuff they would play on the jukebox, I was like, oh, some of these bands are from here. So I thought that was really cool. So anyways, like, yeah, when I moved back to LA, after having like a deathcore band and stuff in Taos, and when I was in high school, that we used to play shows in Albuquerque and, you know, travel to do that. I wanted to start a deathcore band out here, and I met the singer of the band, Corey. We were gonna do a tour with his old band, called Consider Her Dead, and my old band, from New Mexico. We were supposed to do a tour together, and it didn't happen because we were just like high school kids trying to book like a tour, you know, just didn't know what we were doing.
Sure.
But yeah, so once like Goliath had started, they told me they needed like a guitar player for it. So I just kind of joined the band, and then we recorded an EP, and it was kind of the first time I ever made music that like people legitimately liked. You know, more like I think some people liked my deathcore stuff from New Mexico, but you know, it was like a smaller scene. But this was like, you know, we were getting to like, we kind of rose to like being one of the more popular local bands like pretty quickly, to where we were getting to open all like the bigger metalcore and deathcore shows in the SoCal area, like LA, the IE, Orange County, playing Chain Reaction and a bunch of places, you know, I'd really only seen in like videos and like like documentary and live performance videos.
Same.
Right. So it was yeah, it was pretty cool that, yeah, we kind of just developed a reputation pretty early, I guess. And then we started booking like our own tours, and like I really kind of got in like the weeds on doing all that stuff yourself, you know. So once the opportunity happened to like join Winds of Plague, which was like, I even got in that position because I used to work at or a studio with the old bass player Andrew. So I knew Johnny and all them from playing shows with them and Goliath, and like I was a fan of the band, you know, before I joined it. Like I was like a big fan of theirs, and I think it was just like convenient for me to join because I knew how to like record and I knew how to do stuff like that. So I was able to play the songs, and they had seen me play, and Goliath had gotten big enough at that point to where you know, I had like some like legitimate experience. Like where Goliath kind of stopped was where we were starting to like open bigger tours. Like, but like at that point in the band, we were just all kind of exhausted of it because it was just so much work to do DIY stuff on your own. And we just weren't seeing the results we were hoping for, you know, and I don't know, just like no real personal anything. We were actually friends, and we actually just started kind of like riffing ideas again together just for fun to see, we'll probably release some new stuff. But yeah, from that I was able to start playing with Winds of Plague. So I was really lucky.
Well, Winds of Plague is amazing, and I think it's interesting because, you know, you were really immersed in the scene for so long, and that opens up this transition right around the mid 2010s as I see it, where, you know, alternative trap, things of this nature are starting to become immensely popular. And that gets us into basically music production and how you made that transition from Winds of Plague into doing beats into music production. Tell me about that and how that began and around what year.
Okay. Yeah. So during this whole time, even like in Goliath and stuff, I had begun producing other bands, like other local bands. I had been recording their EPs and stuff, and um, I have a lot of friends who are hip hop producers, and like I have for a while. So my friend John and my friend Gabe, who I grew up with in Taos, they like made beats the whole time. I was like, you know, in bands and stuff. So I just would play guitar on their beats, and because I already knew how to record and stuff, you know, I like pretty quickly like figured out how to you know, I'd be like, I could make this, I could do this too in my own like kind of style. So that was probably, I think the first time I started making beats was probably around 2012 or so. Like, and hip hop just was getting like darker and darker and like more alternative, you know. So I've always been into it, but I was into it in a more way like how I was into metal, where like I just like dark music. So stuff like Odd Future and like ASAP Mob and Raider Clan and that sort of scene kind of appealed to me because it was like I liked 3 6 Mafia a lot in high school.
Mm,
And that was kind of the rap I actually like did respond to the most. So yeah, that stuff was kind of the kind of beats I was going for, you know. But also having the metal background, I was kind of like adding like heavy guitars and just like weird stuff that eventually became cool. But at the time, like no one was really doing. Not saying I like pioneered anything or anything. I was just kind of like, it's just like I was making heavy music at the time, and I was just kind of trying to figure out a way to like make rap I liked, you know. I didn't think there would be anyone to go on these kind of beats. But yeah, after making production with my friends, yeah, Can't Fuck John, my friend Gabe, and my other friend Jay Graham too, who I lived with for a while, and he was a big producer, so that was a big eye opener too, where because he produced like Upper Echelon for like Travis Scott while I lived with him, and like, you know, stuff on like Days Before Rodeo, and he produced Broccoli and all kinds of amazing things. Where I kind of realized, okay, like I could do this too. So luckily, as I was producing like the early alternative, I'll just call it the alternative rap scene, you know, which is like the trap metal, emo rap kind of vibe started happening. So I was able to produce for artists like Omen 13, Bones, you know, Eddie Baker, Jay Green, like, you know, some of the Schema Posse people, like that sort of scene. And that scene was just a lot of kids who were into like metal, punk, and like scene kids basically
for
making rap
sure.
music. So I was able to kind of get in on the ground floor of that wave uh early, and then a lot of those artists ended up getting popular, so I just was kind of able to ride the wave of it, you know.
No, that's very sensible. It was interesting because even going back to the 2000s, I remember when Amura came on the scene, I would say around 2006, 2007, it was very interesting because like for deathcore, I could totally see that being the continuation of where Korn and Limp Bizkit for what they had started in the 90s. I kind of saw, I don't want to say I saw Amur carrying the torch, so to speak, but I saw how rap could have a place within the deathcore scene. But it wasn't until years later, especially when I came across your work and work of, you know, mutual friends, that I realized, wow, like this is going to be huge. But I had always wanted it personally.
Yeah, totally. I've always loved both styles of music, and I love when they're blended together. And
Hmm.
some people don't think they should be blended together, but I just like wholeheartedly disagree with it.
Yeah.
I guess there is corny ways to do it, and there isn't, but there is also really tasteful ways to do it.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, totally agree. Like with stuff like Amir, I mean, in the late 2000s, like a lot of the bands looked like rappers. You know, like like the hats, the baggy clothes, and stuff like
Yep.
so. I never saw an issue with that because I also loved like nowadays it's a little different where deathcore is definitely has become embraced by the greater metal community, and I think that's partially because the people who are hating on it in the late 2000s have aged out of caring about the scene.
Agreed.
They're like older, you know, so there isn't as much contention about it being like people would say it's not a genre of metal, and so like just crazy stuff that like makes no sense and has no like bearing in reality, you know. So partially it was because how they looked, because at the time like Lil Wayne was really popular and just that style of clothing was popular. So I think deathcore kids maybe erred a little bit more on the side of being like kind of normal, not really like super eccentric with like the way they dressed in the same way that like scene kids were, other than the swoopy hair.
Agreed.
um
That's an
but
interesting observation.
Yeah, so like I always liked rap to like too. So like I always liked a lot of underground stuff at that time, like Atmosphere and Jedi Mind Tricks and uh you know, things like that. So I never really had an issue with the same issue that some metalheads seem to have with, and like hardcore people seem to have with rap, you know, where I think now it's interesting where the tables have kind of turned where rappers look like they would be in like metal or punk bands, when back then it was like metal and punk bands kind of looked like they would be rappers. So the two have kind of
Well,
had like an interesting weave in throughout each other through history.
well, let's continue with that because when we're talking about industry changes and the way things have evolved and coalesced, in your view, how has the rap, emo, metal, trap scene evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I just feel like I kind of betted on the right horse, where music comes in cycles and is a pretty actually predictable thing in what's going to be popular. So as soon as I saw like Odd Future, it kind of became clear to me that like, oh, like rap, there's going to be like a lane in this that is going to be more alternative, because one, skateboarding being introduced, and not just skateboarding, but like skateboard fashion becoming a big part of hip hop was very different than like, you know, the which came before it, which was like the G Unit sort of like really baggy stuff era.
Sure.
So it was kind of like a night and day thing. And then like Trash Talk being part of Odd Future, you know, it's just became very like clear. And I randomly met ASAP Rocky at a Behemoth show in like 2012, 11, something like that, when only like Peso and Purple Swag was out, and I liked those songs already, and like knew who he was and was like a fan. So he was just like standing in front of me, and I was like, "Oh wow, dude! Like you're at a Behemoth show," and he was just like, "I love this European metal shit," you know. And so like I was just okay, like I just kind of bet on the horse that like rap is gonna get more influenced by metal, and then like the dressing then usually turns into like sonic influence, you know, which is what ended up happening. Where with artists like Bones kind of inventing trap metal, and
Yeah.
then artists like Scarlxrd, you know, who like I produced for too, kind of really like taking that one element of Bones' sound and like pushing it, you know, evolving that, and then also Bones kind of pioneering emo rap, and then artists like Peep and stuff like that taking that side of it and pushing it, which is a more like scene kid thing. Where so as soon as like the emo thing started becoming very clear and obvious, you know, I love that kind of music, and I have since I was a young kid. So for me, playing like emo riffs over trap beats was just like really easy and natural for me, and vice versa with like playing metalcore riffs with like trap beats over it. Like it was pretty easy, you know. It was something that I had been working on for a couple years before it got popular, so I already had like a back catalog of beats that sounded like that I was able to get placed, you know, with other artists doing that. So I think, yeah, it's just, I think rappers developed, have a respect for metal and hardcore that maybe wasn't the case before, or not even just a respect, but like an influence, to where I think nowadays it's more common, especially for like an alternative rapper, um, to be more sonically in line with like emo or hardcore, like pop punk or something like that, in the way they sing and the way they approach music, than it is for them to sound like, you know, Tupac or Biggie, or be like actually more influenced by rap from the early 2000s, you know. So uh yeah, to me it was just kind of, the writing was on the wall way before it became the largest form of music. And always like the rule of thumb is always like, whatever is the most popular style of underground music will become the most popular form of music. And emo rap and like trap metal and all that stuff was very clearly the most popular form of underground music at the time. So it was just, I guess a lot of people in the metal scene didn't see it, but I guess I was just lucky enough to have a foot in both worlds, where it was pretty clear to me.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, you were incredibly prescient. I mean, there's no denying that. You were a pioneer in merging that in a very effective way. So I guess that brings us to your collaborations, because
Thank
you had
you.
mentioned, some of my favorite artists that you've worked with. Of course, you had mentioned Scarlxrd, Bones, JuiceWRLD, Machine Gun Kelly. Could you speak to some of those experiences and maybe some of like your favorite insights?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the praise.
Of course.
Yeah, you know, Bones was probably I would say the first time that I felt like I should take this like really seriously, like kind of like shift my dedication, like from heavy music to, or like metal to, producing rap a lot. Uh and that's partially because, one, he's one of my favorite rappers ever, just because he scratches all the itches for me, you know. It's really diverse, is just like cool dude, like, you know, has been super chill with me like the whole time I've known him. We like still talk, you know, on the internet and stuff pretty regularly. And yeah, I just think he's a real forward thinker. So being able to have songs with him come out was like definitely a pretty cool moment for me. Um, Especially being like a fan before his. And that was kind of when I was like, it's more than just like a hobby, you know, this is something I should double down on. Um, yeah, then you know, the JuiceWRLD one was kind of lightning in a bottle. I've had a couple lucky lightning in a bottle situations where me and my friend Perps from 808 Mafia, we were making beats together, and the beat for Won't Let Go just started as like a guitar riff that I had come up with, you know, like Perps came to my house and we were just kind of writing riffs. And yeah, so it come up with that riff, and you know, then he did the drums on it. And luckily Max Lord, who is Perps is like really good friend, you know, and kind of became my good friend, and he is Juice's engineer. So a lot of times to get to artists, the best way is through their engineer, because the engineer kind of filters what they hear a lot of times, you know. Like a lot of times people will send beats to the engineer will play those for the artist. So Perps and him being close, luckily my beat made it to Juice's ears and he liked it and he made Won't Let Go off it. So, and then that, you know, got on Death Race for Love, which, you know, now it's really cool because it's like a classic album, you know, at this point. I think I saw like recently it was like the 54th biggest album of all time, which is crazy.
That's wild.
You know? Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, so then MGK, yeah, that was also like another kind of lightning in a bottle situation where I had like met him and hung out with him like a handful of times before that song was made. So we already knew each other, but I really liked like what he was doing in terms of just making a pop punk album with Travis Barker, because you know I love Blink-182. Travis in particular. You know, I had known Travis a little bit before that song was made too, and gotten to work with him and like go to his house and, you know, collaborate with him at his house, and just like real bucket list kind of stuff, you know, where a lot of the reason I have a lot of tattoos is because like when I was 8, I saw Travis Barker and started drawing on myself because I thought he looked awesome and I wanted to look like that when I was older.
Sure.
So it was like, it was really cool. But yeah, so I'm good friends with his drummer Rook. And I was just hanging out with Rook, and we went to their house when they all used to live together, MGK's band and him. And yeah, he was doing, they have a little studio in the garage, so we were just doing a little session, and MGK came in, and the session kind of stopped like abruptly for a second, and there was some downtime. So I was like, well, since we're here, you know, I might as well play you some instrumental ideas I had. And funny tidbit, like I had made this instrumental for Sid and Nancy beforehand with my friend KJ, and basically we had made it for another band. Like another band like told us that to make something in the vein of MGK, and so the opportunity came to play that for him, and I was like, yeah, sorry to the other band, but I'm gonna play this for him, you know, because it was just like the thing I had in my head where I was like, this is the best thing I could play for him right now. So I played it, and yeah, we just sat there and just wrote Sid and Nancy like right then and there, most of it at least. And then he like finished like the bridge and stuff like with Travis like a little later. But yeah, so it was just, you know, social, like a right social, you know, setting that just ended up working out.
Of course. So it's very interesting to hear. I mean, I'm curious though, out of all of these projects, it's hard to pick, but which one stands out as one of your favorites, if not your favorite?
I mean, the JuiceWRLD one is pretty like special, you know, because obviously he's not here anymore.
Of course.
And to me, it feels like I produced on like In Utero or something like that from Nirvana. Like it feels like kind of comparable to that. And I feel like he was just like, he's like probably my favorite rapper ever. Like even to call him like a rap, like singer, you know, probably he's more of a singer. I mean, he walks the middle line. That's pretty great. But I just think he is just insanely prolific. Most people who are good at freestyling aren't good at songwriting, and vice versa. Where he is just kind of like a once in a generation thing who is able to do both well and at like an elite level, and that just like obviously why he has so much quality music, you know, because of that skill. And yeah, so getting to produce on an album like that is just like really you know, special, and it's not something you can expect to happen to you like all the time. And even at the time when it came out, it felt special, you know. It wasn't like it's now special because he died. It was like it had been special the whole time. So yeah, I feel really good and like confident like in that being like still really dope.
Absolutely. Well, speaking to that, you had mentioned something previously, which was whatever is popular in the underground eventually rises to the mainstream, so to speak. So I say that to say, what are your predictions for the future? I mean, you were very forward thinking previously. What do you think is going to come next? Because we have seen this explosion, obviously, in what people would refer to as emo rap. It's certainly more than that. But what's coming next, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I have a few theories. I think next, at least from what I'm seeing in like all the sessions I'm doing and just like what I'm hearing like in the scene. Usually, luckily living in LA, you kind of get a little bit of a pre like scope into what's to come, because a lot of times what the artists do here end up being like what kind of ripples throughout the world. And so I don't think now an artist can start making pop punk music and be like a breakout success, because MGK has already had 2 number 1 albums with it. Like all the emo rappers like shifted to making that kind of music basically because a lot of them grew up on it, you know, like a lot of that's like a lot of their like home base. So like emo rap was almost just, I think, a thing that was like cool that people just not even really thinking about it kind of ended up making because they were into like, you know, like melodic trap stuff and kind of referencing stuff that they grew up on. And a lot of those artists end up kind of going back to like what they grew up on, which is pop punk and emo. But since that's been around for a while now, and that wave has kind of already been going for at least like 4 or 5 years, it seems to me like a lot of artists are trying to pivot to also keep doing rock music, but trying to find like where to land. And I think a lot of people are landing on like Deftonesy, like shoegaze style stuff. Post punk seems to be having a big moment, like this is great for me. And I even see a little bit of like D&B, like drum influence stuff happening a lot in pop music, and I can see that going really further. But I definitely think that the like shoegazy Deftones vibe and like even like the new metal-y thing a little bit seems to be still having a bit of traction, and definitely like the post-punk thing, like a lot of like The Cure and like New Order sort of influences seems to be where a lot of those artists are kind of landing on. And yeah, my prediction would be like then in the next like 5 years or so, that's probably what's going to happen. I think a lot of the rage artists too, like who like play like the Playboy Cardi influence is not really going anywhere. And if anything, like if his next album is like darker, like than this one, it might, you know, it could probably intensify that. So I think industrial influence seems to be having a big moment too. So I can see a lot of people going like kind of upping the Nine Inch Nail influence in the production and things like that. I think, yeah, where it's kind of moving. I also see like the on the flip side of that, I also kind of see the early 2000s pop kind of making a little bit of a resurgence in terms of the production too, like more full-time drums, more like kind of fun music you can dance to, kind of like, you know, what like Tate McRae is doing with her new album. And yeah, I think even like the indie side, on like the indie side of things, it seems like the Phoebe Bridgers wave is like just like in full effect with like the Boy Genius influence and stuff. So I can see that continuing, like the darker, that seems to kind of even be breeding into like country and stuff, you know, like alternative country artists kind of like rule the world now, where it's like a mix of like alternative and like folk, like, you know, Jelly Roll, Zach Bryan, Hardy, etc., you know, where these artists are mixing like octane rock and, you know, country, which is honestly the stuff I've liked the most from country music in a long time. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time. Those would be my bets if it was like a betting thing on the next wave. So I've been kind of trying to like work on doing that, my own version of like those sort of sounds with depending on the artist.
No, I'm pretty much loving all of that, especially shoegaze right now, of course, as you said, post-punk having a moment, but drum and bass too. I mean, I have certainly an ear for what's coming with that. These are all incredible selections. And I'm curious because you had mentioned an industrial influence, you had mentioned Nine Inch Nails, but I see your shirt. You have a Typo Negative shirt. Rest in peace, Peter Steele, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to them? I'm curious.
Yeah, I love Typo Negative. I mean, I definitely, I found out about them from just seeing their merch and Hot Topic and on like
Yeah.
Headbangers Ball and stuff. And I just feel like Peter Steele was, if Dracula was a singer, it's Peter Steele. Like the way he rolls his R's and stuff. And yeah, just some of my favorite ballads ever, like songs like Love You to Death and even songs like I Don't Want to Be Me. He comes from hardcore too, and it just usually a lot of times like musicians who come from hardcore, I just can like hear it, in their music. There's always just usually like an authenticity to it that kind of comes from that. Even in like EDM music and stuff, like you can always just usually tell when people know how to make a crowd like move like that. So I think, him being from Carnivore and stuff, you definitely can hear that in Typo. And I mean, they're the goat bands of goth metal, and I definitely see like their like influence like that being more popular too, like them via like, even like Evanescence and things like that, especially in like female singers, like me, I produce for like Maggie Lindemann and stuff. And, I feel like the song we made on her last album was definitely like a heavier, not even just because she's a female singer, that's not it at all. It's just like the tone of the music and like the tone of her singing. I've been getting a lot of that too, is like a lot of people referencing Evanescence. And, so I definitely, to me, Typo and that conversation are a very similar thing.
Of course. No, it's so interesting. And of course, I guess you can't mention him, which is also one of my personal favorite bands without mentioning Typo Negative, but Typo Negative was far before my generation. And I have just started really appreciating them. So it's really interesting.
Love him. I had a song come out recently that I did a remix of. This came out maybe 2 months ago for Black Veil Brides featuring Vivi from him. And they did a Temple of Love cover, which is Sisters of Mercy. So like I did a remix of their cover of it, and it was just cool, really cool to have Vivi's vocals and to get to write music around his vocals and stuff. It was awesome.
That's a dream. That's unreal. So I guess that brings us to a kind of a broader perspective on your life and your thoughts on, the industry. What have been some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career and how have you overcome them?
Really just like kind of being thrown into the industry and just having to learn how like stuff like publishing, splits, how to collect money and how to like make consistent money on it is definitely like a hurdle everyone kind of goes through, and it's like a learned, lived experience. Luckily I have more of like an insight now and I kind of have like my system locked down more, but there's been a couple of times where, I didn't know like, oh, I need to collect my masters and my publishing. And then, when I learned that, then I go back to like claim my publishing, and then you miss out like on like, however long the time was before you start collecting it. So definitely learning how the music business works is a growing pain a lot of people kind of go through. So that was definitely a big one. And like another thing that's been like, a bit a thing was I actually have like narcolepsy and cataplexy. So I have like a sleeping disorder that kind of, I have to kind of like revolve my life around a little bit. So I still have to work as hard as anyone else, but with like a disadvantage. So that's been a little bit of a thing, but some ways, I think it kind of installed like a drive in me and just kind of like a wanting to like prove, like myself that I probably wouldn't have had without having like a crutch kind of installed upon me and like for my health or whatever, so yeah, mostly that and just from like the health thing. But other than that, I've it's been smooth.
Excellent. Well, how do you think in that case, speaking to technology and artificial intelligence, and the coming advancements, how do you think these advancements in music technology have impacted your work currently and the industry as a whole and will continue to impact it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using AI like a little creatively more recently, and it's been really cool getting to like I think there's ways to use it really creatively, and it's coming regardless, so you might as well learn how to like work with it than to try and fight it, because that's always been a losing battle like throughout all of time. As soon as the cat's out of the bag, it's cat's out of the bag, like you can't put it back. So there's lots of websites and stuff up now that mimic artist voice that you can run a take through and have your voice sound like their voice. That seems to be like the extent of where it's at the moment. But one thing I'll do is, this is like some sauce for producers for sure, is I'll run like stuff like a guitar through like a Billie Eilish AI or something like that, and it'll come out with some really weird things where it sounds like Billie Eilish trying to like scat a guitar riff or something I wrote, being like like just like almost like Jonathan Davis like Freak on a Leash thing. And like, I'll like take some of those notes and just kind of blend it in with my production, and it's come out with some cool creative results. So that's like what I've been trying to do creatively. One of the things I could see happening, which could be pretty crazy, would be I could definitely see that, being that now you can run your voice through AI simulators and it is accurate to copying someone's vocals, I could see people being like, well, Frank Ocean isn't releasing an album I wish he would release. So some singer-songwriter who's amazing at music and production could probably make a whole album that sounds like Frank Ocean. If they're insecure about their own voice or whatever, they can run their voice through the AI and put out like a AI like, Frank Ocean album or whatever. And maybe some fans will be like, oh, I like this more, so it's pretty crazy.
It's going to be unreal. Yes, I think you have a better read on it than I do, of course, but the next few years are going to be insane. Um, Outside of music, Michael, what are some sources of inspiration for you personally? Some things that you enjoy?
I enjoy Lord of the Rings a lot and the Tolkien universe. I like lifting weights. I love snowboarding. Um, I like my family, like I just but mostly, honestly, mostly music. Like most everything is through music. Like my friends are all musicians. When I hang out with my friends, usually we make music.
Yeah,
I pretty much is like a day in day out sort of thing for me, to be honest.
of course.
I'll make music. I'll binge watch some TV shows, and I try and like go to the gym pretty regularly just to like keep my head together.
Of course. Well, it sounds amazing. And I think that brings us to our final question. In terms of future projects, in terms of what we all have to look forward to from you, could you speak a little bit to what's next?
Yeah, so I announced this recently, or like we all did. So I started a new band with Shavo from System of a Down, and it's pretty stoked. We have Taylor Barber from Left to Suffer, who's the vocalist. I just did their new album that's about to come out. And my other friend Alejandro Arena is the other singer and guitar player in it. Scary Pool Party, as other people might know him, who's just like inhumanly amazing musician. A lot of people probably saw him. He got like second place in American Idol in 2019. So him and Taylor kind of singing back and forth. Very like system with breakdowns is the way I would put it, because Shavo has such a
Mm,
like unique riff style, and he's written a lot of amazing riffs for System, and like if you hear a System style riff, it's just kind of instantly recognizable. Yeah, so that's gonna be called Shav, and yeah, the album's getting mixed like right now. We just started the mixing process. We wrote like 16 songs together. Me and Shavo had been writing it for about a year and a half maybe, and yeah, so that's finally like kind of like coming together now where we'll play some shows, you know, maybe do a little touring, some fests, just the fun stuff, you know, but I think people are going to like the music. We like the music. So I'm confident since System hasn't been releasing new music at the moment. This is like music from someone from that band that sounds like doesn't. I'm not gonna say we don't sound just like System because Taylor doesn't sound like Surge, you know, and there's more screaming. There's like there's songs that are like borderline deathcore and beatdown. There are songs that are much more melodic and almost like Ariel's-esque, you know. So I think it'll scratch an itch for people like that in that situation. And then I just have a lot of singles coming out with a bunch of various artists, you know, some bands, some rappers. I had a song with Kid Cudi come out recently that's going to be on his next album as well. So that's pretty great. You know, I love Kid Cudi. So I know there's more I could list off the top of my head, but I have so many just things in the canon that like I'm not even I'm blanking on everything I have coming out, but I had kind of like really focused on finishing the Shavo project with him. I mean, I love System of a Down, you know, like I absolutely adore that band and have since I was like a young kid. So getting to make an album with, you know, and produce it and then play guitar in the band is like just like really cool. And also I have did writing sessions with Korn recently. Whether any of those songs see like the light of day or not, still amazing to like sit in a room and like play with them as a band. You know, that was so sick. Like Jonathan's amazing, really cool dude. Kind of been like a big brother figure to me. So things have been going good for me. I definitely can't complain.
Yes, well, it all sounds really exciting. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, and I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say, you know, I'm looking forward to it for everything that you're doing. So thank you for taking the time today to speak with me. It's going to be an amazing, you know, future.
Dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. I appreciate you so much, Michael.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.